The signal that echoed through the stars. The Galactic Empire ruled more than 1,000 worlds. Its banners flew above burning suns and frozen moons. For centuries, no one had dared to stand against it. But deep within the silent dark, something ancient stirred. Something the Empire had forgotten. It began with a faint signal. A transmission that came from the far edge of the galaxy. The message was short, broken, but the meaning was clear. Do not approach Sol. Humanity has awakened. The voice in the message sounded calm, but behind that calm was pure fear. In the grand hall of the Galactic Council, the Emperor sat on his throne of crystal and fire. He listened as Admiral Zarian replayed the message, his scaled hands shaking slightly. The alien lords around him laughed, calling it a prank from smugglers or rebels. Humans, they said, were a dead species, primitive, long forgotten. Their homeworld was isolated, their colonies abandoned. No one had heard from Earth for hundreds of years. But Zarian's voice trembled. My Emperor, this message came from the Dravkan fleet. Their entire armada vanished after sending it. The laughter stopped. The Emperor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. One fleet lost does not frighten me. Perhaps they faced pirates, or a wormhole storm, but Zarian shook his head, his tone low and haunted. They faced something else, my lord. Their last transmission shows energy readings beyond anything we've seen. Something folded space itself. The room grew quiet. The Emperor looked at the hologram again, at the strange pulse forming around a small blue star, the Sol system. He waved his claw, dismissing the fear. Prepare a scout team, he ordered. If humans still exist, we will remind them who rules this galaxy, far away, on a forgotten moon near the edge of the void. Deep scanners picked up the Emperor's command. Buried beneath layers of rock and silence, a hidden human listening post came alive. Lights flickered, machines hummed, and an old AI named Aegis opened its eyes after 200 years. Contact detected, it whispered, its voice metallic yet filled with purpose. Humanity's watch is not over. Across the Milky Way, the Empire's ships began to move. Thousands of warships gathered, their engines glowing like suns. They laughed at the idea of humans, calling them dust, ghosts of the past. They didn't know humanity had changed. They didn't know what waited in the shadows beyond Sol. Back on Earth, the planet once thought dead had become a fortress of steel and light. Massive orbital stations circled the blue world. Human fleets hidden under cloaking fields. Generations had prepared in silence, building weapons that bent time. They remembered what the Empire did centuries ago, enslaving human colonies. Burning their cities, they remembered, and they waited. Inside the command bridge of the dreadnought Erebus, Captain Mason stood before a massive display. The hologram showed the Empire's fleet moving toward Earth. Admiral Zarian ignored the warning, said the ship's AI, voice calm like deep water. Mason's eyes were cold, his voice steady. Then the stars will burn again. A pulse of energy rippled through space as the human fleet came online. Thousands of ships, silent and invisible, aligned their weapons toward the incoming armada. Each ship carried the same emblem, a broken chain, symbol of freedom and revenge. Meanwhile, the Emperor stood at the center of his war room, staring into the void. His advisors whispered that something felt wrong, that the dark between the stars felt alive. He ignored them, pride blinding his senses. He did not see the faint shimmer near his fleet. He did not hear the whisper that passed through subspace, a human whisper. Retribution. Moments later, the first human strike hit. A beam of pure light sliced through the void, shattering a destroyer in half. Then silence, then another strike. Faster, brighter, unstoppable. The Empire's ships fired back, their weapons tearing through nothing but empty space. They couldn't even see their enemy on the Erebus. Mason watched in silence as the Empire's fleet broke apart. Transmission from the Emperor, the AI said. Mason nodded. Play it. The Emperor's voice came through, full of fear now. Who are you? Mason answered. The warning you ignored. Then the communication ended. The stars themselves seemed to flicker as the Erebus moved through the remains of the Empire's fleet. And the galaxy understood humanity had not vanished. They had evolved. They had waited. The Empire's pride marches to war. The Emperor's command echoed through the halls of the Imperial Citadel. Across 1,000 worlds, soldiers prepared for war. Every fleet admiral, every general, every weapon master was summoned. No one dared question the Emperor's rage. The council chamber glowed with crimson light as holograms of star systems flickered in the air. Humanity dares to strike at us, the Emperor growled, his voice cold and sharp like a blade. They hide in the dark. They think they can frighten us with tricks and whispers. We will show them the true power of the Empire. The admirals bowed. Grand Admiral Sarath, a tall insectoid warrior with glowing eyes, spoke proudly. My Emperor, we will crush their world before they even understand what war means. The Emperor smiled. Satisfied with such loyalty, then go, he said. Burn their sky. Across the galaxy, shipyards roared to life. Titan-class warships rose from the docks, engines burning with blue plasma. Millions of soldiers marched in perfect rhythm. Banners raised high. The Empire moved with confidence, believing themselves invincible. But in the shadows, a few remembered the signal. A few whispered that the Dravkan fleet had not fallen by chance. They spoke of a single human vessel that could vanish and strike like lightning, and those whispers spread like wind through the ranks. Meanwhile, aboard the human dreadnought Erebus, Captain Mason stood at the observation deck. Before him stretched the void, filled with silent warnings and faint signals of enemy movement. The Empire is mobilizing, said the AI, its tone calm yet heavy. They are bringing every ship they have. Mason nodded slowly. That's exactly what we wanted, he replied. He turned to his crew, eyes cold as steel. They think this is war, but they don't understand what humans call vengeance. Back on Earth, deep within the underground fortress called Helios Command, human leaders gathered, old generals, scientists, and tacticians stood around a glowing map of the galaxy. The room was silent until Admiral Vega spoke. They're coming with everything, she said. We'll face a storm unlike anything before. General Rourke smiled faintly, his voice gravelly. Good. It means they've taken the bait. He pointed to the holographic map, highlighting 3 empty sectors. Operation Retribution begins when they cross these coordinates. On the other side of the galaxy, the Empire's fleet entered the dark void near Sol. The stars grew dim. Scanners flickered. Interference detected, one officer said nervously. Admiral Sarath waved a claw, dismissing it. Human tricks, he said proudly. Let them hide. We will burn their planet soon enough. But as the fleet advanced, something strange happened. Every ship's sensor showed ghost readings, hundreds of unknown contacts flickering in and out. The Imperial crews grew restless. Then the communications channel opened by itself. A voice spoke, cold, human, and calm. You were warned. The next second, space itself screamed. Human ships decloaked from the void, massive and silent. Beams of pure energy tore through the first line of Imperial cruisers. The shockwave rippled across the entire fleet. Explosions lit the stars like a second dawn. Return fire, shouted Sarath. The Empire's guns roared, filling the dark with plasma fire. But the human ships moved like ghosts, their weapons cutting with terrifying precision. Each strike crippled another battleship. Each explosion whispered the same truth. The Empire was losing. On the Erebus, Mason watched the chaos unfold. Phase 1 complete, the AI reported. Do we proceed to the second strike? Mason nodded, his voice calm. Yes, he said. Send the message to the Emperor. The transmission pulsed across subspace, a single word. Retribution. At the Imperial capital, alarms blared as the message reached the throne room. The Emperor rose from his seat, fury burning in his eyes. Find them, he roared. Find Earth and erase it from the stars. But his generals looked uneasy. My Emperor, one said softly. Our fleets are dying faster than we can understand. The Emperor clenched his fist. Then send everything, he growled. All ships, all legions. If humanity wants war, we will give them the end of the galaxy. Far across the stars, Mason closed his eyes. They still don't understand, he whispered. This isn't war. It's judgment. And the void answered with silence, broken only by the sound of distant explosions. The Empire's pride had marched to war. But soon, they would learn what it truly meant to challenge humanity, and now their wrath burned the stars. The fall of the Emperor's armada. The stars burned red above the shattered remains of the Imperial fleet. Debris floated in silence like ghosts of fallen warriors drifting through the dark. The once proud armada that had marched to crush humanity now lay broken. The void itself seemed to whisper the truth. The Empire was bleeding. Admiral Sarath stood on the bridge of his flagship Vengeance. Staring at the screens, half his fleet was gone. Thousands of ships lost in minutes. How can they hit us without being seen? He shouted, his claws trembling. Where are they firing from? But the sensors showed nothing. Every shot from the humans came from nowhere and everywhere at once. His officers were panicking. We're surrounded, Admiral, one cried. They're inside the blind zones of our scanners. Serath's voice broke with anger. Impossible. No one can hide from Imperial tech. But humanity already had far away, hidden behind the shadow of a dying sun. Captain Mason watched the Empire's chaos unfold. The holographic table before him displayed hundreds of red dots blinking out one by one. Targets neutralized, the AI reported calmly. Enemy fleet structure collapsing. Mason stood silent for a long moment, then said quietly, Keep pressure, no mercy. He turned toward the stars, his reflection cold against the glass. They wanted domination, he said. We'll give them extinction. Inside the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's command chamber filled with static. Every few seconds a new report came. Another fleet destroyed. Another system lost. He clenched his fists, his golden armor cracking under the force of his rage. How is this possible? He hissed. Humanity was primitive! They were nothing. But the old advisor beside him, eyes dim and voice trembling, spoke softly. My Emperor, perhaps they were never weak. Perhaps they were waiting for this. The Emperor turned sharply, his voice full of hate. No, they are beasts. I will crush them myself. Across the void, the surviving Imperial ships tried to regroup. They sent distress calls, they tried to retreat. But each time a signal reached them, it was intercepted by humans, twisted, mirrored, and sent back with a chilling phrase, Judgment has begun, on board the Erebus. Mason's second-in-command, Lieutenant Ray, looked at him. Sir, they're retreating, she said. We can finish them now. Mason nodded slowly. Deploy the Archons. Moments later, space shimmered as massive human war drones appeared, each one the size of a city, wings glowing with blue light. They moved with perfect silence, cutting through the Imperial fleet like blades through glass. The Empire's last line of defense fell in less than an hour. Inside the Vengeance, Serath's breathing was heavy. He could hear the screams through the comms. Admiral, we're hit! The shields are collapsing. Admiral, the human drones are boarding. Serath gritted his teeth, pulling his plasma blade from his belt. If this is how I die, he whispered, I die with honor. But before he could even move, a beam of white light pierced his bridge and the Vengeance was gone. The Emperor received the news in silence. His eyes stared at the holographic display showing his grand fleet disappearing one by one. Billions of lives erased in hours. Summon the Shadow Council, he ordered coldly. If humans want total war, then we will burn their world. Meanwhile, Mason stood over the command console of the Erebus. Enemy fleet destroyed, said the AI. Estimated survivors, less than 3%. Mason took a deep breath, his tone steady. Then Phase 2 begins. Prepare to move on the Imperial capital. The AI's voice lowered. You intend to strike their throne world? Mason nodded, his gaze firm. They need to see what happens when the hunters become the hunted. The Emperor made the galaxy bleed for centuries. Now he will see the fire he started. In the distance, human fleets gathered around Sol. Titan-class ships formed a wall of light. Each ship activated its jump drive, their cores humming like thunder. The human armada was ready, and as the countdown began, Mason whispered softly, For Earth, for the fallen, for the forgotten. And with a flash brighter than any sun, the human fleet vanished into hyperspace. Far away on the Imperial capital, the sky darkened. The people looked up, seeing strange lights forming above the atmosphere. A sound rolled through the heavens like the roar of a storm, and the first human dreadnought appeared, cutting through clouds like a god descending. The Empire had ignored the warning. Now, humanity had come to collect the debt. The fall of the Emperor's armada. The void was silent, broken only by the faint echoes of distant explosions. Stars shimmered like cold eyes watching the Empire's greatest defeat unfold. The Galactic Armada, once the symbol of dominance and pride, now drifted helplessly in the dark. Their mighty formation was shattered, their confidence gone. Their arrogance burned away by something they could not even see. Admiral Serath stood on the bridge of his flagship Vengeance, eyes wide as he stared at the chaos around him. Status report, he shouted, voice cracking under the pressure. A frightened officer turned, trembling. Admiral, the second fleet is gone. We lost contact with the forward command ships. How many destroyed? Serath demanded. All of them, sir, the officer whispered. The humans hit them first. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of dying engines. Serath's claws scraped across the console, fury and disbelief mixing in his veins. They strike from nowhere, he said bitterly. Their weapons bend light, hide in gravity. No radar can find them. He slammed his hand against the table. We are the Empire. We don't lose to ghosts. But outside, the truth unfolded. Human warships, cloaked in distortion fields, moved like shadows between the stars. Each one fired with perfect accuracy, cutting through the Empire's ships as if they were made of glass. Their beams didn't just destroy, they erased, leaving only silence behind. On board the human dreadnought Erebus, Captain Mason stood calmly as the battle played out. Report, he said quietly. The AI's smooth voice answered. Imperial casualties exceed 60%. Remaining vessels are attempting to flee. Permission to pursue? Mason shook his head, his tone cold. No. Let them run. They need to carry the message back home across the galaxy. Fragments of the defeated fleet limped through space. Ships burned. Life support failed. And survivors whispered the same word again and again. Humans. At the Imperial Palace, the Emperor paced before a massive galactic display. One by one, red icons marking his fleets vanished into black. What trick is this? He hissed. No enemy can destroy half a fleet without a single casualty. An advisor stepped forward carefully. My Emperor, perhaps we underestimated them. Underestimated? The Emperor snapped, eyes burning with rage. They were animals. Traitors, scavengers, wanderers. His voice grew softer, darker. But something changed. In the far reaches of space, survivors of the battle sent fragmented messages. Each recording was the same, crackling voices screaming. Then a whisper before silence. The same haunting phrase in human tongue. You were warned. Back aboard the Erebus, Mason watched the transmission feed showing Imperial ships falling apart. Lieutenant Ray approached, her expression grim. They're scattering, Captain, trying to regroup in nearby systems. Let them, Mason said. Phase 2 begins when they call for reinforcements. He turned to the AI. Activate the Archon units, space rippled, and massive shadows unfolded around the Erebus. Archon-class autonomous war drones, each the size of a city, emerged from subspace. Their wings glowed with soft blue light. Their hulls smooth and silent, they moved without sound. Without hesitation, within seconds, they began hunting the broken Imperial ships. In the heart of the battlefield, Admiral Serath realized what was happening. Those are not ships, he whispered. They are machines. Machines built for genocide. He gritted his teeth, shouting to his crew, Target them all. Fire everything! The Vengeance unleashed a storm of plasma fire, lighting the void. But the human drones were too fast, too precise. Every Imperial missile detonated before reaching its mark. Then, one by one, the Archons turned their weapons. Beams of white energy cut through the Vengeance's hull like paper. The Admiral's last thought before the explosion was disbelief. How could one species wield such power? In the Imperial Command Tower, the Emperor watched as the live feed from Serath's flagship went dark. He stood motionless, then slowly lowered his head. An entire armada, he murmured. Destroyed in hours. The silence in the chamber was heavy. Even the guards dared not breathe. Then the Emperor's voice turned sharp. Summon the Shadow Council, he ordered. If the humans want to burn the stars, we will drown them in darkness. Back on the Erebus, the crew celebrated quietly, but Mason did not smile. He looked at the distant stars, the faint glow of destroyed worlds. They think this was victory, he said softly. But this was only justice. The AI spoke again. Incoming message from Earth Command. Authorization for final stage granted. Mason's jaw tightened. Then it's time, he whispered. He turned to the crew. Plot a course for the Imperial capital. Let the Emperor see the fire his arrogance has created. Engines flared. Light bent, and the fleet vanished into the folds of hyperspace. Behind them, the ashes of the Empire's armada drifted among the stars. And through that endless silence, one truth remained clear. The galaxy had learned what it meant to ignore humanity's warning. But the real storm had only begun. The Emperor's last stand. The Imperial capital of Valthara had never known fear. Its golden towers touched the clouds, its streets glowed with the light of endless power. Billions lived under the Emperor's watchful rule, believing his reign eternal. But that illusion shattered the moment the sky began to burn. It started as a low hum, deep and distant. Like thunder rolling through the heavens, the people looked up, pointing to the strange ripples of light spreading across the upper atmosphere. At first they thought it was a storm. Then, in a blinding flash, the first human dreadnought appeared, a ship larger than any the galaxy had ever built. Dark as night, silent as death. Its hull shimmered with energy, its design unlike anything the Empire could comprehend. Then more appeared, one after another, until the sky was filled with human ships. The fleet moved in formation, like an army of angels descending for judgment. Inside the Imperial Palace, alarm screamed. The Emperor stood before the war table, surrounded by his generals and advisors. "They dare to come here?" He growled, his voice shaking with fury. "We will destroy them. Activate the planetary shields." But the technician's voice trembled. "My Emperor, the shield generators, they're not responding." The Emperor turned sharply, eyes burning. "What do you mean, not responding?" The answer came from above. A pulse of white light cut through the clouds and struck the power grid. Entire cities went dark in seconds from orbit. Captain Mason watched as the lights of the capital flickered out one by one. "Shields down," reported the AI. "Target locks confirmed on all military installations." "Proceed?" Mason stared at the planet silently, his reflection glowing on the display. For a moment his expression softened. "So many lives," he whispered. Then his tone hardened again. "Proceed." Thousands of human warships unleashed their fury. Beams of concentrated plasma rained down upon the surface. The Empire's defenses tried to respond. Anti-orbital cannons fired into the sky, their blasts tearing through clouds. But the human ships moved with impossible precision. Each counterattack was neutralized before it could even reach orbit. In the palace, the Emperor clenched his fists as the ground trembled beneath him. Outside the window, the skyline of Valthara burned. Still, he refused to surrender. "Prepare the Citadel cannons," he shouted. "Even if it costs us everything, they will see our fire." Beneath the capital, enormous structures awakened. Hidden weapons built over centuries powered up. Towers split open, revealing massive energy cannons capable of piercing stars. They turned toward the sky and fired. Beams of red light shot upward, striking 3 human ships. One dreadnought exploded, another fell in flames. The people cheered for a moment, but then the cheering stopped. The sky changed color. The clouds split apart, revealing a storm of light as humanity's true power unfolded. Hundreds of Titan-class warships descended, forming a wall of silver and blue. Their weapons glowed brighter than suns, and for the first time in its history, the Imperial capital trembled beneath someone else's power. Inside the Erebus, Lieutenant Ray looked at Mason. "Sir, the Emperor's fortress is shielded by something massive," she said. Mason nodded. "The Citadel," he replied. "That's where he'll make his last stand." He turned to the AI. "Prepare drop units." Within seconds, massive dropships launched from the human fleet. Each carried elite soldiers and mechs built for planetary war. As they entered the atmosphere, the Emperor stood at the top of his throne tower. He could see the human ships descending, their trails cutting through the clouds like falling stars. He raised his blade toward the sky. "Let them come," he roared. "Let them see what an emperor truly is." Around him, his guards rallied, forming ranks of crimson armor. The ground shook as human dropships landed near the palace. Steel doors opened, and soldiers in black armor stepped into the light. Their visors glowed blue, their rifles humming softly. The battle for the capital began. Human troops advanced through burning streets, moving with ruthless precision. Imperial soldiers fought with desperation, their weapons roaring. But humanity had mastered every battlefield. Every tactic, every element, every explosion. Every step forward brought the humans closer to the Emperor's throne. Inside the palace, the Emperor could hear the battle drawing near. He turned to his generals. "Evacuate?" "Never," he hissed. "This is my world, my empire, my destiny." The walls shook as a human rail strike tore through the palace gates. The Emperor drew his blade, glowing with ancient energy. "If humanity wants my crown," he growled, "they will take it from my cold hands." Outside, Captain Mason's ship descended lower through the smoke. "Landing sequence complete," the AI said. Mason looked toward the palace burning on the horizon. "Then it's time," he said. To end an empire, the last war of the galaxy had begun. And as fire and thunder filled the capital skies, the Emperor prepared to face the one enemy he had sworn could never rise against him. But humanity had risen, and their wrath was far from over. The battle for the throne. The imperial palace burned under a blood-red sky. Smoke rose from the ruins of once proud towers. The streets of Vilthara were chaos, filled with fire, screams, and the thunder of collapsing metal. Human soldiers marched through the devastation, their armor reflecting the flames. Each step echoed like the beating of war drums from the Erebus. Captain Mason watched the feed from his visor drone. The human ground teams had breached the capital walls, their formation tight and perfect. "They're pushing toward the palace," Lieutenant Ray reported. Her voice steady but low. Mason nodded. "Keep orbital support ready. We don't stop until the Emperor falls." On the surface, the battle was fierce. The Emperor's Crimson Guard, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, stood their ground. They fought with glowing energy spears and plasma blades moving with deadly precision. But the human soldiers were faster, stronger, and relentless. Their rifles cut through armor like paper. Their drones hovered above, guiding every strike in the heart of the city. A massive explosion tore through the central courtyard. Dust and fire filled the air, and through that storm of destruction, human tanks rolled forward. Their cannons glowed blue, firing bursts that shattered walls and sent alien troops flying. Every second, the humans advanced closer to the palace gates. Inside the throne hall, the Emperor stood on the steps of his golden dais. The ground trembled as explosions echoed closer. His generals were dead, his fleets destroyed, his armies shattered, but still he refused to yield. "This throne will not fall," he whispered, his voice like thunder. "Not to them." The palace doors exploded open with a wave of heat and light. Human soldiers poured in, their armor dark as obsidian, their visors glowing cold blue. They moved in perfect formation, spreading through the hall like a rising storm. "Hold the line," the Emperor roared, and his guards surged forward to meet them. The clash was brutal. Blades met energy shields. Gunfire tore through the grand chamber. The sound of war filled the air. Metal clashing, energy screaming, lives ending in seconds. The Emperor's guards fought valiantly, but one by one they fell beneath human precision. Still, the Emperor did not move. He watched from his throne, his golden armor gleaming under the firelight. Then from the far end of the hall a figure entered through the smoke. Captain Mason, his armor scarred from battle, his rifle lowered but ready. The Emperor's gaze locked onto him. "So," he said coldly, "you are the face of this vengeance." Mason's voice was calm, low, filled with power. "I am the voice of every world you burned," he said. "The echo of every child your empire enslaved." The Emperor stepped forward slowly, drawing his plasma blade. "Then you will die as they did." The hall fell silent, the fires dimming as the two faced each other. The Emperor charged, his blade slicing through the air like lightning. Mason dodged, his armor's shield flashing blue as the blade glanced off. He countered with a burst of plasma fire, but the Emperor blocked it with a shield of pure energy. They moved like shadows, striking and clashing, power meeting will. Each blow sent waves of force through the hall, shattering pillars and breaking stone. "You think you can destroy an empire?" the Emperor growled, locking blades with Mason. "We ruled the stars before your species learned to walk." Mason pushed back, his strength unmoving. "Then maybe it's time you learned how to fall." The Emperor swung again, faster than before, but Mason anticipated it. Twisting his rifle and firing point blank, the shot hit the Emperor's armor. Tearing through his shoulder, he roared in pain, stumbling back. His golden chest plate cracked. Still he smiled, blood dripping from his mouth. "You are strong, human," he said, "but you don't understand power." He raised his blade high, its light growing brighter. "This is the power of a god." But before he could strike, Mason lifted his hand. A surge of energy burst from his wrist module, freezing the Emperor mid-motion. The human tech locked onto the blade, disintegrating it into particles of light. Mason stepped forward, his voice a whisper. "No gods left." He raised his plasma rifle and fired. The shot pierced the Emperor's chest. The golden armor shattered, the light in his eyes dimmed. He fell backward onto the steps of his throne, staring at the burning ceiling above. His final words came as a whisper. "We could have ruled together." Mason looked down at him, his tone cold. "Humanity doesn't bow." The palace shook as explosions tore through the outer walls. Human banners unfurled across the citadel outside. The people of the Empire watched as the human fleet hovered above their sky. The war was over. The Empire had fallen, and for the first time in millennia, the galaxy was silent. Captain Mason stood at the shattered window. Looking out over the burning city, he pressed his communicator. "Mission complete," he said softly. The AI's voice responded, "Confirmed, Captain. The Emperor is dead." Mason took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the stars. "Then the galaxy is free," he said. But freedom always comes with fire. Above him, the human fleet began to ascend, their engines lighting the heavens like dawn breaking after endless night. And as the capital turned to ashes below, one truth remained. The Galactic Empire had ignored the warning, and humanity's wrath had burned the stars. The aftermath of fire. The war was over. The once golden skies of the imperial capital were now black with smoke. The Emperor's palace, once a symbol of eternal power, lay in ruins, its towers broken, its banners burned. The streets that once echoed with pride now lay silent. Covered in ash and dust across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Empire had fallen. The human fleet had destroyed what no civilization had dared to oppose. World after world received the same transmission. A simple signal sent from Earth Command. A human voice spoke, calm and steady. "This is Captain Mason of the United Terran Fleet. The Galactic Empire is no more. Let this be a warning and a promise, and humanity does not conquer. But humanity does not forgive." Billions across the stars listened in silence. Some fell to their knees, trembling with fear. Others whispered that justice had come at last. On distant worlds once enslaved by the Empire, people looked up at the night sky and saw human ships passing overhead. For the first time, they felt hope. For the first time, they were free on the Erebus. Captain Mason stood in the command chamber. The screens around him displayed hundreds of liberated systems, each one showing human aid ships descending. Lieutenant Ray stepped beside him. Her voice soft. "It's over," she said. "The galaxy will remember this day forever." Mason didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the burning world below. "Wars don't end," he said quietly. "They change shape." In the following weeks, humanity began rebuilding what the Empire had destroyed. Human fleets didn't stay to rule. They stayed to protect. Engineers, doctors, and scientists were deployed to the ruined planets. They rebuilt cities, shared technology, and treated the wounded of all species across the stars. The phrase Terran Peace Corps became a symbol of hope, but in the shadows of forgotten sectors, whispers spread. Some alien warlords refused to believe that humanity would stop there. They called them monsters, destroyers of worlds, gods of vengeance, and yet even they spoke the words with fear, because they knew what had happened to those who ignored Earth's warning. Far above the galaxy, in the orbit of a dying star, the Erebus floated silently. Mason sat in his private quarters, looking at an old photo, Earth, blue and beautiful. He remembered the wars that almost destroyed his own species centuries ago. He remembered the vow humanity made, never again. "Peace is earned through fire," he whispered. "And we've paid our price." The AI's voice broke the silence. "Captain, you have an incoming message from the Galactic Council of Free Worlds." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "Yes," the AI replied. "They want to form an alliance. They seek humanity's leadership." Mason smiled faintly. "Leadership," he said, "or protection?" The AI didn't respond. Mason stood, walking toward the viewport, the stars reflecting in his eyes. "Tell them Earth will listen," he said, "but remind them, we don't rule. We defend across the stars." Statues of the fallen emperor were torn down. In their place rose memorials to the victims of the old regime. On each monument, one phrase was engraved, "We were warned." And beneath it, in human script, another line, "Never again." Months passed, and slowly, the galaxy began to heal. But even in peace, the memory of the human fleet remained. Children whispered stories of glowing warships that came from the dark. Old warriors told tales of a single man who ended an empire with words and fire. And among all the worlds, one truth spread faster than any rumor. Humanity had become the shield and the sword of the galaxy. In the great archives of Valthera, rebuilt under human guidance, a single recording was preserved. The last words of the Emperor before his death, captured by human drones, he had said, "We could have ruled together." And beside it, in the human record, Mason's reply was engraved forever. "Humanity doesn't bow." As the Erebus prepared to depart for Earth, Mason looked at the stars one last time. "Mission complete," he said softly. "But our watch continues." The engines flared, light surrounded the ship. and with a sound like thunder swallowed by silence, the dreadnought vanished into hyperspace. In that moment, the galaxy knew peace, not because it was granted, but because it had been earned through blood, courage and fire, and every world, every race. Every being would remember the lesson carved into the stars: never challenge humanity, or their wrath burns brighter than suns. The new dawn of humanity. Years passed since the fall of the Galactic Empire. The stars, once filled with war and fear, now shone with peace. Worlds once enslaved began to rebuild. New alliances were born, new voices rose, and at the heart of it all stood one name that every world knew. Earth, the humans had not conquered. They had liberated, they did not demand tribute. They offered guidance where once there had been weapons. Now there were schools, hospitals, and peace stations. Human engineers helped alien worlds rebuild their skies. Human doctors cured diseases that had spread for generations. For the first time in galactic history, unity had replaced fear. The galaxy began to call this era the dawn of humanity. But on Earth there was no celebration. There were no parades, no thrones, only silent remembrance for those who had fallen. In the halls of the United Terran Command, the walls were filled with names of soldiers, scientists, and civilians who gave their lives to free the stars. Captain Mason's name was among them. Though his fate was a mystery, the Erebus had vanished years ago. Its last transmission a simple message: mission complete, returning home. But it never arrived, yet his story did not end every year. On the anniversary of the Empire's fall, fleets across the galaxy sent a silent signal into the void. 3 pulses of light repeating endlessly. It was the signal Mason had used during the war. And somewhere, deep within the endless dark, the signal always came back as if someone out there was still watching, still guarding on the rebuilt world of Thera, now called Unity Prime. Alien children played under a sky filled with silver satellites. A monument stood at the city center, carved from black stone. At its top was a human figure, Captain Mason, standing with one hand raised toward the stars. Beneath him, in glowing letters, the inscription read, "He burned the stars so the galaxy could see the light." Leaders of 100 worlds gathered each year beneath that monument. They no longer spoke of fear, they spoke of understanding. They no longer saw humans as destroyers, but as guardians. The Council of Free Worlds was born under the protection of Earth, and at its core stood the Terran Accord, a promise written in the same words that ended the war. Humanity does not conquer, humanity defends. Back on Earth, the blue planet shone brighter than ever, its oceans healed, its cities vibrant with life. Ships from 100 species landed in peace, trading, learning, growing. The humans had done the impossible. They had united the galaxy, not through fear, but through strength, and yet, behind every victory, there was a memory of the flames that started it all. In the orbit above Earth, a new station was built, Erebus II. It carried a plaque on its command deck, engraved with Mason's final words recorded before he vanished. "Peace isn't the absence of war," he had said. "It's the will to protect it." Those words became the foundation of every oath taken by new Terran officers. Every captain, every soldier, every explorer repeated them before launching into the stars. One evening, as Erebus X orbited the planet, the scanners picked up a faint signal from beyond the rim of known space. 3 pulses of light, slow, steady, familiar. The crew stared in silence as the signal repeated. "Is it possible?" one of them whispered. The commander smiled faintly. "It's him," she said. "He's still watching." Far beyond the reach of any map, in the shadow of a dying star, an ancient ship drifted. Its hull scarred, its engines dim, but its heart still alive inside. A lone man sat in the captain's chair, his uniform faded, his eyes tired but calm. Before him stretched a sea of endless stars. He pressed a small button on his console, sending out the same signal once more. 3 pulses of light, the symbol of Earth. "Still here," he whispered, "still watching," and across the galaxy, every world that saw that signal remembered the legend, the story of the day the stars burned, the story of the day humanity rose, not to rule but to protect, not to conquer, but to ensure that no empire, no tyrant, no darkness would ever rise again. For in every corner of the cosmos, carved in monuments and whispered in stories, one truth endured: never challenge humanity, for their wrath burns like fire and their light never fades.